Welcome to the Spread Zone, presented to you by FanDuel. Tim McKernan and Anthony Stalter with you. We are on remote location during the holidays. Riz vacationing. Anthony, we get to go over the magic that was the previous week. And not terrible for us.
Good.
But not great either. Taking a look at the picks here, Anthony. You went 3-2. I went 3-2. You got your lock right with the. Who were you on your lock? I got you down here.
I think it was Cleveland.
Cleveland. That's right. And I loved that play. Cleveland
it
plus
didn't
10.5.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the final score, it was sweat free. But if you watched a little of the game, it looked like that one was going to get away, and the Bills were going to roll. But Cleveland just kept hanging around in that one and I wouldn't say almost won the game outright, but had an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. That was you spoke through the reasoning on your pick on that one, and that was sound from the get-go. I lost my lock. I was on the under of the James Madison running back Wayne Knight, 71.5 yards, with about 3 minutes left in the game, and they were down by, I think, 30 points. I guess we would know what it was. It was down by 27 points because they covered that 20.5 or 21.5, which burned you.
Yeah.
He took off for a 49-yard run to cover the number. Who would have thought the gentleman would be running? But they did, and I guess Oregon was caught off guard as well. So that caused my lock to lose. And then James Madison scoring the touchdown caused you. We both lost on one play, essentially. We went from 4-1 to 3-2 with Wayne Knight's run to, I think it was about the 1 yard line. And then James Madison backdoor covered for what was a legitimately bad beat.
I forgot that you were on Wayne Knight in that situation. That was the one that burned us the most.
Yeah.
Because Oregon's in complete control. And when you're laying 20.5, there's going to be the opportunity for the back door. But
100%.
With the way that Oregon was controlling the pace, with the way that they were consistently up front, I didn't think that was going to be an issue. And, of course, there we are late in the fourth quarter, and that big run breaks off. I had forgotten, though, that it got you, too.
Yes, who would have thought the Wayne Knight run got me? I will say this, number one, the process, your process and your logic with the Browns and Bills, for example, it was sound. It delivered. In this case, both of us and plenty of other people who I'm sure were on Oregon, especially after seeing the disparity at 3 o'clock Central Time between Ole Miss and Tulane, thought there's just not going to be any chance. Our process was right. I am quite certain for every one person who is on the Wayne Knight running yards total, there were about 5,000 who were on the Oregon minus 20, 21.5, depending on what you got it, and got burned by that. But Oregon could have scored, if they wanted to, 100 points in that game. And I don't know how closely you were watching, and I was watching at the very beginning. James Madison clearly was able to move the ball against them, and the live total when the game was 6-3, because Oregon didn't get the extra point early on, was only at 48.5. And if we had a live edition of Spread Zone, I would have been on with siren emojis saying go over, because Oregon's going to score at will, and it looks like James Madison might be able to put up between 14 and 21 points themselves, and therefore 48.5 struck me as a very favorable number. We were able to capitalize on that. It still doesn't help from the Wayne Knight run or the James Madison backdoor cover for the purposes of this podcast.
But it is, I like how you phrase it, though, with the process and the thought process. It's not like, hey, here's the pick. It's here's the reasoning and here's how I got to the pick.
Yeah.
So I like your thought process on that. My question to you is, so Ole Miss thumps Tulane, not a game at all. Ole Miss, and it was either one or two ways. It was going to happen one or two ways. Either Ole Miss was going to roll and no issue without Lane Kiffin, and we'll see if it impacts them in the second round, or it was clear from the beginning that Ole Miss was going to struggle, and then we had to kind of reflect. It went the first way where Ole Miss was rolled. But my question to you is, going back to the James Madison and Oregon game, with the way that James Madison was able to move the ball against Oregon, do you now view Oregon differently?
No, and my reasoning is once it was so clear that they were up by so much, it's a get through it because
Sure.
the style points thing is over. Now, with that said, Dante Moore was out there at the end of the game, which was a little surprising. But I think if Oregon was in a different spot, I don't think that that's an issue. If anything, looking ahead to the matchup with Texas Tech, which we will tend to on next week's edition of the Spread Zone, Texas Tech isn't going to beat them through offense. Texas Tech is going to beat, at least I'm operating on that premise. Perhaps I'm wrong. Right. Texas Tech's going to beat them with their defense. But if anything, I would say Oregon looked so impressive offensively that you go, okay, maybe they have righted the ship from the game in which they put up just 20 points against Indiana and struggled in Kinnick against Iowa in early November. That fifth seed, man, that's the sweet spot. The fifth seed is the sweet spot. You're going to get the 12 seed, and then you're going to get the weakest of the top four in a neutral site. So if anything, I would say keep an eye on Oregon. If they needed to win big and they couldn't, that's a different thing. But that was kind of the cautionary tale for both Ole Miss and Oregon bettors going into that game because there's not a need for style points. Perhaps you're going to see guys get pulled early on and just make sure that they're healthy. In Ole Miss's case for Georgia and Oregon's case for Texas Tech.
Yeah, that was the risk, right? If you're going to take Ole Miss or you're going to take Oregon, that was the risk. Do they pull starters after they get up, or they go into cruise control? It didn't hurt Ole Miss. It did hurt Oregon from that standpoint. But yeah, good observations. All right, I went 3-2. You went 3-2. How'd our guy Riz do?
Riz went 2-3. So for the podcast overall, one game over 500. He lost his lock. He was on the Rams -1.5. He was on the verge of covering that for his lock in one of the best games in the NFL season this week, that Thursday night game. But alas, he was on the Rams.
So he had the Rams laying the 1.5 because we recorded on Tuesday.
That's correct.
But by kickoff, it was 1.5 Seattle.
That's correct. So for those of us, myself, who bet it, I lost. But for the podcast, I took Seattle and I won. Because I was getting 1.5. Riz was laying 1.5. So that number moved substantially before kickoff. A 3-point swing, for that matter.
And then you and I were also on Miami, correct?
Loved Miami. That's a game. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. That was a game Miami dominated. And they were in a spot where they could have won that thing by a whole lot more. And it wound up being a sweat until the very end with Marcel Reed's interception.
Yeah, when that went, so when Miami scored the TD, and I'm happy for the kid because he put the ball on the ground.
Yes.
You know, he was the one that they were consoling on the sidelines, and then he winds up getting in the end zone. But I thought, I'm like, there's a little too much time here.
Yes.
You're starting to do the math in your head, where Texas A&M could score, force overtime, and now all of a sudden we're right back where we started from. But
that's exactly right.
We got the pick, and then Miami was able to cash.
Yeah, that was one. Rarely on this podcast, when two people are on the same game, does it hit. In this case, we went 1-0 last week, and then also I was on Alabama money line.
Nice.
That got home and lost on Kejuan Lacey of Ole Miss going over 126.5. He got hurt, but those are the breaks. What are you going to do? And I was on the Rams. You were on Miami with me, and the Panthers +3 against Tampa. Well done. But you and the Falcons, kind of like me and the Missouri Tigers, it's a rough relationship. This time the Falcons got you.
Yeah, Arizona takes a 10-0 lead in that game, and I thought, okay, well this is how it plays out. The Falcons come out, they get the big win over the Buccaneers on Thursday night. They go in Arizona, so back-to-back road games.
Yes,
they're coming off the win. In fact, I think they were coming off 2 wins. Yeah, they beat the Saints. They beat the Bucs. So it's like we're starting to roll here where it's that classic letdown spot. Michael Wilson catches a touchdown pass where he's rolling over and the ball goes off Kobe Bryant. Not that Kobe Bryant, obviously, rest in peace, but the cornerback for Atlanta, and rolls into Michael Wilson's hands for a gift touchdown. They go up 10-0. I thought they were going to roll. But Kirk O'Chains and the Falcons had had different ideas on that one. So
Kirk Go Chains. Yeah, that was
that was a surprise.
That was a big surprise. And then, as I mentioned, the Oregon backdoor cover. So here we are heading into our Week 17 picks, Week 18 picks in college. Here's what we got. You are at 61 and 59, 51% against the number, 7 and 9 on your locks, 44% on locks. I am at 57 and 59, 49% overall, 9 and 7 on my locks. I have been on a cold streak on the locks. That really bothers me. Riz is at 47 and 67, 41% overall, 8 and 9 on his locks, 47% on that, 41% overall. Riz is in a rebuilding year here, Anthony, but he will bounce back. So the stage has been set. There is the recap from the previous week. We will get into our picks this week. We will have 4 games, both college and NFL, to choose from, and a lock of the week. Tim McKernan, Anthony Stalter, Riz on vacation. This is the Spread Zone, presented to you by FanDuel. Welcome back to the Spread Zone, presented to you by FanDuel. Tim McKernan, Anthony Stalter with you. Riz on vacation. We are on remote during the holidays, so you don't get to see the wonderful studios we usually are at. Maybe that'll be what turns this thing around. Anthony, you are in first place at 61 and 59 on the year. And we have a combination this week of bowl games and NFL games. Betting on bowl games, certainly a holiday tradition. You always try to figure out who is motivated, who is not, who's lost players to the transfer portal, who is not. I have split my 4 picks before the lock on bowl games. How are you approaching this week?
With caution, of course. I think you nailed it. Yeah, when it comes to the bowl games, you're trying to cap motivation, right? And that is almost impossible. Give you a clear example yesterday. I don't know if you're watching. So we're recording on Tuesday. For those that don't know, there was a bowl game Monday. The only bowl game was Washington State and Utah State.
Yes,
I kind of had it on. Yeah, I kind of had it on the background while I'm cleaning up for the holidays and things like that. And I heard the announcer say not once but twice, Utah State, and I quote, doesn't look like they want to be here. and how they played looked like they didn't want to be there. Washington State rolled, and it was a one. I think it was a 1.5 point line. Yeah. And so you're trying to kind of figure that out while doing the limited research that you can, because a lot of times with these beat writers, some are following the team, some are following the team from afar. You know how that works, Tim. So it's difficult. The playoffs are a different story. You get a good feel on both sides, but these bowl games are tough.
Yeah, and the thing I would tell people is if you are interested, you can see if you can gauge that within the first handful of minutes, in particular by watching the play on the lines, and then see if you can identify a team that might be right there with Utah State. And actually, the 2 bowl games I'm picking are based on motivation. But you have the honors, Anthony. You are the leader, 51% against the number at this point. Who are you starting off with?
So I've identified 2 bowl games that I like this weekend. I'll start off with the one, and you got to kind of follow my logic here. But Clemson -3 against the Penn State Nittany Lions. Obviously, a rough year for Penn State. You can view it as they get into this bowl matchup with Clemson, and by the way, that is a noon kickoff Eastern on Saturday. It's the Pinstripe Bowl game at Yankee Stadium, which tends to be pretty close. But Penn State, Penn State's obviously having a rough year. They're in transition. A lot of guys from Penn State, I'm sure, going to be transferring. I like Clemson in this matchup because I think Dabo Swinney views these types of games as some sort of statement that nobody's really taking, right? Like if you're watching Clemson, you're not getting the statement that he's trying to make, but it's like, look, 8-5, right? 8-win season. Who would have had us 8-5?
You're right.
Master manipulator. But I do think laying only a field goal with Clemson is the way to go. That's my first pick. If you look at Clemson the last couple of games, they beat South Carolina 28-14. Furman we can toss out, not a good game. But I go back to that Louisville game. It was sloppy. Louisville could have won by a couple of points if they just made some field goals. But Clemson played Their last three opponents, again, if you take out Furman, who they beat 45-10, they beat Florida State 24-10. They beat Clemson 20-19. They beat South Carolina 28-14. Their defense has played very well. And again, I think Dabo Swinney is going to view this game as some sort of statement over a Big Ten opponent, a wounded Penn State team. But I'm going to lay the Clemson. I'm going to lay the 3.5. I'm going to lay the 3 with Clemson.
I have that down as my first college play. As a matter of fact, I am on the Clemson Tigers -3 against Penn State, and so much of it is for exactly what you said. For Clemson, this game matters. For Penn State, it is the final chapter of what has been a brutal book for a team that went into the season, not just with playoff hopes, but with national championship aspirations that came to an end in the first week of October. They're going into the Matt Campbell era. This is the transition. So often when you see a school that is transitioning from the old coach to a new coach and has the interim in there, you see them get worked over, especially in the transfer portal era. Big fan of Clemson. Surprised the number isn't bigger than 3. Riz is not touching any college games. He is on his first game, the Colts, +7. Phillip Rivers putting up some points against the 49ers, but not enough. Colts +7 against the Jaguars. Anthony, you are next up on the tee box.
The other bowl game that I like is BYU -4.5 against Georgia Tech. Again, if you're trying to figure out what the motivation is for teams, I think BYU is going to be the anti-Notre Dame. Notre Dame, of course, opting out. I understand why they did. They wouldn't have had guys like St. Louis's own Jeremiah Love, most likely. They were salty about it, and they opted out. That's fine. This isn't the podcast to debate whether or not it's a good look or not, or whether they should, whatever. But BYU 11-2. Their only 2 losses were to Texas Tech. Now, they didn't have the most daunting of schedules, but I think BYU looks at this as a flex opportunity to say, let's finish things. They have a bunch of guys that I don't think will enter the transfer portal. And Georgia Tech on the other side just had a weird season. I mean, at one point we thought they were a shoo-in to represent the ACC in the conference title. Instead, they don't even make it. It's Virginia and Duke. Their offense stagnated against Georgia. Their defense played good in that game, but other than that, Tim, they gave up 42 to Pitt. They gave up 34 to Boston College, who had a terrible year this season. They gave up 48 to NC State. I think this is a situation where BYU puts a lot of points on the board and eventually pulls away to cover that 4.5.
Yeah, I like where you're coming from on that, and that certainly makes a lot of sense. That's a team that felt like they got penalized for their conference championship game,
right.
And of course, Alabama did not. I am sticking in the bowls for one last college play this week. A sneaker team, a team nobody would even think about if they were talking about teams that had a great year. The New Mexico Lobos, first in the Mountain West. One of their 3 losses this year was in Ann Arbor, a game that they were relatively close in throughout, wound up losing by 17. They beat UCLA, which led to the end of the Deshaun Foster era at UCLA, and they are on a heater to finish off the season. They have won 6 straight. I do not think Minnesota will have the same level of excitement for this, whereas for New Mexico, this is a big deal, and New Mexico is getting points. Minnesota this year, the Golden Gophers, could look great at home, but look really bad away from home. I will take the Lobos +2.5 against the Golden Gophers as I attempt to handicap motivation in a team that I think also is flying under the radar for college football fans, and I can't blame anybody for paying very little attention if you are not a New Mexico fan. Riz is going to go against the Raiders. Raiders covered against the Texans this past weekend, but he is going to go with the Giants, getting 1.5 in Las Vegas. Riz on the Giants and the Colts to start his picks this week. Anthony, you're next up.
I'm going to go to one of the Christmas Day games. I'm going to go to Minnesota. All right, so I'm playing. I'm playing the news a little bit. Again, we're recording on Tuesday.
Yeah.
But JJ McCarthy, who got injured in that game against the Giants over the weekend, did not practice Monday. Now, if he practices today, things look a little different. But if Max Brosmer winds up starting that game,
we saw his clinic in Seattle.
Oh man! And look, Detroit is not Seattle when it comes to defense, right? And Minnesota's defense is red hot. But after what happened Sunday to Pittsburgh, the Packers are hosting the Ravens this weekend. The Lions absolutely need this game. Give me the Lions -6, and I'm going to kind of play this as Max Brosmer starts over J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah.
If McCarthy starts, maybe he's banged up, Tim.
Yeah.
This is a gotta-have-it moment for the Lions. So give me the Lions -6.
I got to tell you, I like the logic on this one too, man. I was wondering about that one, how the Lions would respond to what took place against the Steelers on Sunday afternoon. Speaking of the Steelers, I am going to take the Browns +3.5 against the Steelers. As we referenced at the start of the podcast, Anthony, Cleveland can linger, and they lingered against the Bills. This is counting on some semblance of the market overplaying the Steelers after they go into Detroit and win one of two signature games, actually three signature games when you include the Bears and Packers from this weekend, with the Rams, Seahawks, Bears, Packers, and the Lions and Steelers. So I think there are a lot of attention on it, especially the way that game ended. Therefore, I think the market overvalues the Steelers. And I could certainly see Pittsburgh winning, but I also could see Cleveland winning. And I like getting 3.5 at home, so I will take the Cleveland Browns +3.5. Back-to-back weeks on the podcast that we roll with the Browns.
Hey, they served us well last week.
They took care of you last week. Riz is going with the Dolphins getting 5.5 in the Battle of South Florida. Dolphins getting 5.5 against Tampa Bay is his third pick. All right, Anthony, fourth and final before we take a break and go with our locks.
So I'm going to stay with that game that Riz just chose with the Bucs and the Dolphins. I thought about laying the 5.5 with the Bucs because, again, it's a got to have it situation. They just lost to Carolina in the NFC South game. They have Carolina again next week, and Carolina plays Seattle. So if it plays well here, Seattle beats Carolina because Seattle needs the game too, and then Tampa Bay, if they could beat Miami, they're all tied up, and then it's basically the de facto NFC South crown next week, right? It's the NFC South Championship next week in Tampa. But 5.5's a lot for a team that's not playing well right now. So give me the over 46.5 in that game.
All right.
Bucs and Dolphins. With Devon Achane on the field, there's a lot of explosiveness. With Quinn Ewers playing quarterback now for Miami, there's a lot of potential for stalled drives. Tampa defensively has not been great, but they have their full complement of wide receivers back. They haven't run the ball a lot, so I think they're going to have to they haven't run the ball well.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to put the ball in the air a lot of either big plays or stopped clock. 46.5 feels a little low for this game. So give me the over 46.5 in the Bucs Dolphins.
All right. I am also finishing with an over as well. This one strikes me as one that if the weather works for us, and looking ahead at the forecast so far, it is favorable as the Midwest and the North even of the country are in a warm front for the holidays. So Cincinnati is hosting Arizona. The number is 53.5. Both these teams really don't enjoy playing defense. And
defense option.
It's something else. It's the only way I feel like we get burned on this one is if you have terrible conditions in Cincinnati. When I go with overs more often than not, I like to have the climate controlled retractable roofs. But in this particular case, I don't know if it's even going to matter. They're both going to put up points. Bengals, Cardinals over 53.5. Riz rounds out his plays with the Texans, who struggled with the Raiders this past week, going on the road to Los Angeles and taking on the Chargers. Texans getting 1.5. That's how Riz goes. He goes Colts +7, Giants +1.5, Dolphins +5.5, and Texans +1.5. I'm on New Mexico, the Lobos, getting 2.5 against Minnesota. Clemson and Penn State. I'm taking Clemson -3, as is Anthony. Bengals, Cardinals over 53.5, and Browns +3.5 against the Steelers. Anthony, you're on Clemson -3, as I referenced. BYU -4.5 against Georgia Tech. The Lions -6 at the Vikings, and the Dolphins, Buccaneers over 46.5 in a game that could certainly be super high scoring. All right, we have our locks left for the week 18 of the Spread Zone. Tim McKernan, Anthony Stalter with you. Riz on vacation. This is the Spread Zone, presented to you by FanDuel. Welcome back to the Spread Zone, presented to you by FanDuel. Tim McKernan and Anthony Stalter with you on the podcast. Riz on vacation. Anthony, you have been getting it right with the locks as of late. I have been on a 3-game losing streak. I was at 9-4 at one point, now sitting at 9-7. I value my locks more so. I hate this 3-game losing streak. Let's all get hot with the locks. What you going with for this week, sir?
So I'm going to go to the game that we just spoke about with Riz. He's taking the 1.5 with the Texans.
Yep.
I'm just going to take the Texans on the money line plus 110, get a little added value there. I don't know what happened against Vegas. I mean, for the Raiders to be even in that game late doesn't make any sense. Maybe it's a situation where Houston just they were rolling for a while there, and
they Oregon James Madison'd it.
They did. I mean, Ashton Genty broke off a long run. So you're right, man. The similarities are there, right? Give me the Texans on the money line. Don't forget, these two teams played in the playoffs last year, where the Chargers were favored going into Houston and lost outright in a game that, I mean, Houston just beat them up. Yeah. Justin Herbert had one of his worst days as a pro. He's been running around and doing good things. I don't see how the Chargers match up with this Houston defense.
Yeah.
So give me the Texans, who again they've been rolling. They got to keep pace because Jacksonville looks like a freight train right now. So I'll take the Texans on the money line.
Yeah, Jaguars with a big time win this past weekend in Denver. So Houston does have to keep up. Anthony, Texans plus 110. This is a game that I don't think anybody was really thinking about at the beginning of the year, but after last Saturday night with the clutch catch to wrap it up in overtime, and then the 49ers and Christian McCaffrey and Brock Purdy going off on Monday Night Football, you've got yourself a signature night game for the NFL, and I'm sure they're delighted with what they've got. 49ers and Bears. And I've told you this, Anthony, since the beginning of the season, when they get themselves a signature matchup, and when's the last time we've been able to say this involving the Chicago Bears in late December? When you get a signature matchup on Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football, they like to get you a high-scoring affair. This one is going to go over. It's set at 51.5. It falls into the category of the number could be in the 60s, and I'm still going over. 49ers, Bears, over 51.5.
Well, if San Francisco plays defense, well, hell, San Francisco just plays like they did in Indianapolis on Monday night, offensively and defensively, you're going to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what was going on there. Phillip Rivers was picking them apart there in the early going, and obviously 49ers are going to put up some points against Chicago. So I'm going over on that one, 51.5, and Riz is going back to the Rams for his lock. They burned him last week. He's going back to them, their Monday night game against Atlanta. The Falcons will host the Rams. The Rams are laying 8.5. Riz taking the Rams and laying the 8.5 against the Falcons. You are the Falcons whisperer. How do you feel about it?
Well, he is taking advantage of like the Falcons coming off a win, so I can't blame him on that one. The only thing I would say is Atlanta's been goofy this year.
Yes, they have.
If you think back to the Sunday night game in week 2 when they went on the road against Minnesota, they just lost to Tampa, and their defense sacked J.J. McCarthy like 8 times. Hosted Buffalo on a Monday night, and Bijan Robinson went off, and they upset the Bills as a home dog. They've for some reason they've come to play in big games, and Raheem Morris was the defensive coordinator the year that the Rams won the Super Bowl. So these two teams, at least Raheem Morris, is going to be very familiar with how to slow down Sean McVay's offense. But if it winds up being a track meet, forget it.
Yeah,
the Falcons won't keep up. Drake London returned last week, but he didn't look right. He didn't look like he was 100%. So
Yeah,
I don't think a week is going to do anything.
He's not there yet. So Riz on the Rams. I'm on the 49ers. Bears over 51.5, and Anthony on the Texans money line. There it is. The plays are in for this holiday week. We wish everybody the best of luck and happy holidays. For Anthony Stalter, for Scott Rizzuto, I'm Tim McKernan. This has been the Spread Zone, presented to you by FanDuel.
We provide information about sports betting for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm gambling regulations in your state of residence. To participate in sports gaming, you must be 21 years of age or older and be physically present in a state where sports betting is legal. If you or someone you know has a sports betting or gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org for more information and further assistance.